Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and I am here in the great city of New Orleans, standing in front of the Eastern District of Federal Court. You may remember we had a feature on Dr. Shiva Akula, and we will give you a link to that because it's been quite a number of months now since we did it. But basically, he is on trial. The trial began today for some allegations of alleged Medicare fraud. Now, I'm not going to go into all of it because you can easily click on that link and find the totality of what the government is alleging. And we're going to have Miss Belinda Parker Brown. She's the one that put me onto this, and I appreciate her doing so because, as everyone may know, that's what I did for the federal government with the FDIC. I was a federal government fraud investigator, so this brings up some memories. It's been an interesting first day. I'll say that.
Yes,
and I will elaborate, but first, Belinda, why don't you go ahead and chime in?
Yes, and you know, Robert, I think that you are the perfect, ideal person to be here in a trial that's dealing with Dr. Shiva Akula and Medicaid fraud because of your background and your experience.
Thank you.
You know, I just want to say to our Sound Now family that this is a very interesting case. It's just time for us to engage and get more knowledge and education about how these things happen to our doctors here in the state of Louisiana. You know, this trial have been interesting so far. The day we've been here from the tune of over 5 hours.
Yes,
I know
indeed.
for sure. And the jury selection and the opening statements and
First witness.
The first witness have taken the stand. So, Robert, why don't you just talk about your observation in the courtroom today? I think that Dr. Akula is handling himself very well. You know, he's being very patient as a doctor going through something such as this. But tell us about your observation in the courtroom today, Robert. It was very interesting.
It was.
And boring.
Well, we'll get to that too. It was. And the judge, to begin opening statements, he let the jury know that, look, the opening statements, and the same is true of closing statements, they don't constitute evidence. He said, nevertheless, they provide a good roadmap of what you will expect to see in this trial. And while that's correct, they don't constitute evidence, but I can tell you a lot of cases are won and lost on how effective those opening arguments are and the closing arguments. Now, the government went first, and there was a young man that basically wanted to portray Dr. Akula as just out to commit Medicare fraud in no uncertain terms. And he said there was a sample of 30 claims that were audited, and he said, and all 30 of them failed. So he had a 100% fail rate. And he pointed out that the total, now this is from a 2014 audit. It's actually dated 2015. But we're only talking about 30, okay? And then he said, well, with a 100% fail rate, and he didn't come out and say it, but he's strongly insinuating the whole operation is fraudulent, okay? The opening arguments for the defense said this audit, there was not even an allegation that any fraud was committed. And I want to just emphasize this. When you're talking about federal government documents, it doesn't take much to create an exception. And when the government was putting on its case, what they were showing was exceptions, okay? Let me give you a quick example. When I was with the FDIC, we had to do our travel vouchers, and they were required to be done on the third Friday of every month. They had to be signed in blue ink, okay? Mandatory, must be signed in blue ink. Well, I was at a bank in Houma once, and I had done my travel voucher because they had to be turned in that Friday, and then the field office supervisor has 2 weeks to get them in to our regional office in Memphis. I just got sloppy, and I signed the darn thing in black ink, okay? And so I get a phone call on Tuesday of the next week, and he says, look, you signed it, he being the field office supervisor, he said, you signed this thing in black ink. And it dawned on me that's what I'd done. And I said, look, I really apologize. I will come in on my own time, completely redo the travel voucher and sign it in blue ink, because otherwise you're not going to get paid, okay? And he made it clear to me that, because I had told him I will come in on Friday, because I don't do midweek travel. I didn't. I never did. He made it very clear to me on that day, that Tuesday. He said, no, sir, you will come into this office today and you will fix this and turn in a revised travel voucher tomorrow morning. And I said, well, if that's an order to me, because if he told me that's what I got to do, that's what I got to do. I said, well, that means I'm entitled to travel time because this is clearly for official business. And he said, nobody's going to argue about you getting travel time. I said, fine, I'll be in and I will get the travel. In fact, I was kind of happy about it, to be honest with you, because I meant I had 2 hours of travel time on Tuesday. Right. I redid the travel voucher, and I get 2 hours to get back to Houma on Wednesday morning. But when I went to leave, the EIC, that's short for Examiner in Charge, he said, and I quote, or he asked, where the hell do you think you're going? Because I'm leaving at 3 o'clock. There's 2 more hours left in the workday. I said, I got to go back and fix my travel voucher. I signed it in black ink. He said, no, you'll do that on Friday. And I said, the big guy in charge told me I'm doing it today. And he was not happy, the EIC. But my point in saying all of that, back then, I'm probably an average travel voucher, given that it had to cover the month, probably may have went anywhere from $1,200 to $1,900, depending on if you happen to have been assigned to Baton Rouge Bank, which I rarely was. Did I commit? Yeah, it's an exception, and they're not going to pay you because it's got to be in blue ink. That was the type of thing that I observed when the government was presenting its case. Mere technicalities, not an issuance of fraud, okay? Now, I want to emphasize something. When the government put up its first witness, all right, Lord have mercy. She was a nurse brought in from Oklahoma because that's who had the contract for doing these audits. And by the way, the defense attorneys even said, look, she's not even qualified to do the very work over which she's auditing. You have to be either a nurse practitioner or a doctor. They made that point. They also, you're going to love this part, in the opening arguments, he's telling the jury, he must have said the word boatload 4 or 5 times. Boatload. He said, they are paying this woman a boatload of money to come in here and provide this testimony. They are paying her a boatload of money. So, okay, prosecution goes first to present its case. First witness, the nurse from Oklahoma, okay? Lord have mercy, it was 2.5 hours that they had her up there. And I'm talking about, if you want to talk about minutia of 4-digit codes, of billing codes, and I could tell the jury was already, one guy was, 5 minutes into it. Now, you got to imagine, this is 2.5 hours, and the jury can't.
And the judge admitted that it was
At the very end, the judge said, look, I realize much of this testimony was not stimulating. Boy, was that an understatement, okay? Yes. But here's what I want to point out, because they were trying to say that there's 4 different, and we're not going to go into the minutia, but there was 4 different categories of billing, depending on whether it's, at-home care or all the way up to inpatient at a facility where things are not looking good and you're about to die. Unfortunately, my mom ran the gamut because my mom was on hospice, so I could relate to an awful lot of this.
Right.
Could relate to an awful lot of it. But they were trying to point out that he was abusing one of those 4, okay? And they're making it out like, oh, he sticks out like a sore thumb compared to all the other peers. So when the defense attorney gets up, he wants Defense Exhibit 32 put up on the screen. Defense Exhibit 32, okay? And so he's showing that in the other categories, and I'm not going to bore you with a ton of numbers, but I wrote them down. He showed that in the other categories, the average Louisiana stay was 182 days, whereas Dr. Akula's Cannon Hospice was 130 days, 52 days less. When he asked the nurse, and her name was Shauna Hull, he said, do you have an observation on this? She said, I've never seen this.
Wow.
I've never seen this.
That's
okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
And you could tell the prosecuting attorneys started to they started to get real uneasy.
Very uneasy.
So then he went on to show another category showing that the #1 biller of hospice in the state of Louisiana averaged 760 days, and the average was 86 days. Dr. Akula's practice, 32.89 days, barely a third, okay? And so she said, well, they didn't show me any of this. And he said, this is a government document. We got this from them.
Yes.
And it's your testimony that they never showed this to you? They never showed it to me.
And my point is for being here, Robert, and I really think and appreciate the way you have summed this up for us, and that, we see that when she admitted that the government never showed her these documents, that is the reason why Louisiana United International, as a civil, constitutional, human rights organization, have gotten involved with Dr. Akula's case, is because we suspect that there's some type of targeting of black and brown doctors here in the state of Louisiana. And we want to be in this courtroom every single day that this trial is going on, so that we can court watch to connect the dots, Robert,
sure,
on whether or not this is a target on our black and brown doctors here in the state of Louisiana. This is serious.
Exactly. And let me just say this. Like I said, they had her up there for 2.5 hours, going over the most
qualified to be an expert.
And going over the minutia of detail, and I'm telling you, the defense attorney destroyed everything in 5 minutes.
Yes,
okay.
he did.
And here come the prosecuting attorneys. They're scrambling. You can tell, okay, this is just blown up in our face.
Right.
And I want to bring up one other real thing real quick, and then we'll start to wrap it up. There was a piece of evidence to be introduced, and unlike everything else that was put on the Elmo, this one was basically a cardboard piece of evidence. Now, they did have the paper to back it up. So the defense attorney goes in front of the witness, and he said, now look, I'm going to set up a hypothetical. And I'm going to tell you something. When I heard those words, and Murphy Painter, if you happen to be watching this, you'll know it well, one of the most incredible moments I've ever seen in a trial, and I have relayed this previously, but it occurred in the Middle District of Louisiana when Murphy Painter was undergoing his criminal trial. And his attorney was Mike Fowler, one of the ones I rank in the top 4 of this whole state. And Mike Fowler, on one day in court, he said, all right, I'm going to set up a hypothetical. And he said, I'm going to set up a hypothetical. He did it about 12 times, okay? So the next day, Patricia Jones, the U.S. attorney, who her counterparts, her colleagues here in New Orleans,
yes.
She has a witness on the stand, and she said, okay, I'm going to set up a hypothetical. The second she got the word hypothetical, I'm going to just grab this because I'm afraid the wind may be a little too strong. I don't want it to blow my camera over. And so the second she got the word hypothetical out of her mouth, Mike Fowler sprang up and said, objection.
Yes.
And
no.
She was saying, objection to what? And he said, Your Honor, she's setting up a hypothetical. And Patricia Jones said, Your Honor, Mr. Fowler set up hypothetical after hypothetical after hypothetical after hypothetical yesterday. I never will forget the words of James Brady, the federal judge. He has since gone on to be with the Lord, an excellent judge. But here's what he said. He said, quote, he most certainly did, and you never objected. He has objected.
No
objection sustained. And I whispered over to her, because I sure don't want to be held in contempt. You know how it's like to be held in contempt. And this would have been perhaps direct contempt.
Right.
You know, so in his courtroom, I said, no decent attorney would fail to object to a hypothetical. But as she just pointed out, our U.S. attorneys there let him get away with asking hypothetical. So, folks, I want to say this. I want to reserve the right to change my prediction, because this is only the first day. But I'm going to tell you, things make a lasting impression, okay?
Yes, they do.
But my prediction is Dr. Akula will be completely and totally acquitted on all charges. Now, that's based on what I've seen today. I want to reserve the right, because you never know, things could be a lot different tomorrow.
Before we end, Robert.
Well, yeah, I want to say one last thing. But here's the unfortunate thing. Let's say he is acquitted, because I think based on what I've seen so far, he's going to be acquitted. He's still stuck having to pay all of these attorneys. He's not going to get reimbursed for that.
Right.
Now, Murphy Painter, fortunately for him, because he was the former Alcohol and Tobacco Control Commissioner, not only did we, the taxpayers, when he was acquitted, we had to pick up his $600,000 in legal costs,
wow,
as well as our own $1.1 million in attorney's costs. Let me tell you something. They have got some money tied up in this case. You can take it to the bank. So that's the unfortunate thing, is that even if he's acquitted, he's going to be stuck. He's got no way to recoup all of he's had to outlay. Now you go ahead and chime in.
I'm glad you made that point, Robert, because that's one of our big concerns here. And not only that, you know, it's costing a lot of money for the federal government to bring this case.
Oh, it's costing an enormous amount of money.
Yes, absolutely. When we see what happened in the courtroom today. Now, there was one interesting thing that that was brought up, and they used a term that I was not familiar with, but that I know
where
exactly
you're going.
what it meant, that when they seal something that they don't want.
I'm so glad she reminded me, because I forgot all about that.
I want you to, make that point. Right.
Well, and to a broader point, everybody is very anxious for a witness by the name of Kelly Anderson. Am I right? Kelly Anderson, all right. Whoa, are we all waiting for this witness?
Yes,
all right. She is the one who Dr. Akula has said was basically his Judas, all right? She's pretending to try to be helpful of this Medicare audit, when in reality, she's been secretly feeding all of this material. And then we find out today in court that there had been a QTAM lawsuit filed in seal.
That's it.
Under seal.
They
only found out about the lawsuit last week.
Yes.
Okay. So
her husband is her
husband, a gentleman by the first name of Toby. I'd have to look up his last name. Her boyfriend is an attorney. Okay. Yes. And so he's been working with Kelly Anderson. That was
Dr. Akula's lead administrator.
Lead administrator of the North Shore, right over in Covington.
Correct.
Or I guess it was Covington, but anyway, the North Shore. And the defense attorney said, make no mistake.
Right. I think
he said, make no mistake, she did not give a flying flip. Now, those are not his words. She could care less about trying to help out and uncover any irregularities in Medicare. I wrote them down. Number one, she could care less. Said all she's interested in is making money for herself. And number two, she brags to people about the, quote, little brown man, and said, and number three, her boyfriend, Mark Toby.
That's him.
And they filed the QTAM lawsuit, okay? I can't wait for Kelly Anderson, okay? Now, folks, y'all know that I've been backlogged on a lot of LSP material.
Maybe we can get an interview from her, Robert. You think so?
I doubt it. I kind of doubt it. But I know one thing, I can take notes on her testimony. She can't stop me from doing that.
Okay.
But we ain't going to get an interview. You can forget that. I know I wouldn't agree to an interview. But trust me, I'm going to get to some pending LSP material. I'm getting more even as we speak. But this one kind of rises to the top. I've been so anxious for this trial. It was originally supposed to be back in July, but it got continued until today. But it's bringing back so many memories because, like I said, this is what I did. So when I was with the FDIC.
I wish the government would have had contacted you, Robert.
Well,
they probably would have saved the taxpayers a lot of money. But I want to say this. The judge said that we anticipate at least about 5 to 7 days?
5 to 7 days. So this is not going to be a short trial.
Are going to go anywhere between 8 o'clock until like 5.
He let the jury know that hey, we're going to start at 8. Well, actually, he asked them. They had a preference for starting early in the morning, but he did say, look, the traffic is horrendous at 5 o'clock, so we're going to plan on probably shutting it down at about 5:30 because you're not going to go anywhere anyway in leaving here at 5 o'clock.
One more point, Robert.
Sure.
While we was there, we was kind of whispering back and forth, and one of the things that the government wanted to point out is that when you're a hospice patient, that you're only allowed to stay in there for what, 6 months or something like that?
Well, yes.
What were they talking about? Because you said that your mom got to stay in.
Well, they said it will send up a red flag. Okay. And all I can say is my mom, who I obviously miss more than I have words to say, I guess she sent up a red flag because she was on hospice. My mom was a fighter.
Yes.
Maybe I got a little bit of that from her. I hope so. But my mom was on hospice for 26 months before finally succumbing to what ultimately was a metastasis of breast cancer on July 9th of 2021.
So 26 months.
26 months.
Yes.
When she went into the nursing home on June the 6th of 2019, she had already qualified for a hospice. It was Bridgeway Hospice right there in Baton Rouge. I don't mind giving them a plug because, oh my God, oh Lord, they were heaven sent. And it really helped me a lot, because if you've never cared for someone who's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I pray you don't ever have to, because the person you once knew, while they still love you and you still love them, that person is no longer there because the mind
and the hospice is the best place a lot of times for those patients.
Well,
Robert, what I also heard was that Dr. Akula did a lot of patients. There was a lot of referrals to his facilities because of the service and the love and the care and the home environment, that he offered his patients. And I think that that came out. That came across very clear.
I think it did, and during opening arguments, they made it clear when it's the defense's turn, they're going to bring family members in to say what a tremendous blessing he was. And look, when you've been through someone who's been on hospice, I know from experience, there's nothing like a truly caring doctor. And the prosecution hasn't uttered one word to try to suggest. In fact, the defense said they've never said the first word to say any of these procedures were not performed.
That's right.
That he committed fraud and billed for stuff that didn't happen. And in fact, you saw these stats that on 2 of the 4 categories that it was way below. The government doesn't want to present that. It's going to be one-sided. Right. But unlike a grand jury where you can get away with that, making everything one-sided, I guess they figured, we're the federal government. This is just one little doctor. We're going to mop the floor with him. Wow. They found out, and look, let me just say this, because I know we're starting to run a little long on time. But you tried to bring in, or he did, or y'all together, an actual group based out of Florida that has the kind of experience that would have let the federal government know, look, you've got to fully understand, and they would. Not only were they not going to have it, they wanted to try to bring those people in and sanction them from Florida. And just as one other quick side note, because if you didn't know this, if you go back and look at that other feature, there is an enormous amount of animus that has built up between the assistant prosecutor here. I'm drawing a blank on this, not district attorney, but whatever the case. The federal prosecutor, but you call the lead, and I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank because we're not in state court where you'd say district attorney, but can't believe when I have a blank like that. But at any rate, there's tremendous animus between her and Dr. Akula, and it's become, in my opinion, quite personal. And you can see that in some of the filings. And Dr. Akula did a magnificent job. I said that in that feature. And as a pro se, he's out, at that point, he was doing all this on his own. And he pretty well showed improper acts by her. And so I think animus is feeding into a lot of this. But let me
not to mention there has been some indictments in regards to his company with payroll fraud.
That's what I understand. So, I think it was a mistake if they thought we're the federal government with the incredible resources, which is true. They have incredible resources.
They're abusing
we
those resources.
will mop the floor with him. Well, they found out what he may lack in infinite resources, he makes up for in knowing this business. And then, to your point earlier, They talked about the fact he came over from India, had absolutely nothing.
Right.
Got his, it was Chicago was involved,
Right.
Tulane was involved,
Texas, right.
Texas was involved,
Right.
and they made it clear this man, nothing was given to this man. He worked his, and they use the word butt off. He worked his butt off, and they're trying to hang out. I'm going to make this one last point. Trying to make out the point of his brother-in-law. They want to paint the picture that, well, now he's off in India, and we can't bring him in, and they're making it out like, oh, he done skipped over to India, and we're not going to be able to present him to you. But they're blaming him because he was ahead of billing.
Right.
And I'm looking. Oh yeah. And he pointed out. He said that he didn't get indicted until 2019. Talking about Dr. Akula, even though the indictment entails transactions from, I believe, back 2015, 2016, maybe even 2017. But they point out that he was available during the time of the indictments. Then he was available in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And he said, and they never one time made any effort to bring him in and depose him. And they said because they don't want to hear what he's going to say.
Right.
In the end, the jury will be the one to decide. The jury is a very mixed blend.
They tried to make it look bad, the fact that Dr. Akula had his family members.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Business.
And the defense said, there are lots of very successful family-owned business. We are not going to apologize for employing family members. We're not going to apologize for the fact that he made $1 million a year, basically.
Yes.
He said that's what this country's founded on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's all during opening arguments.
And one of the very interesting things, too, is that not once did Dr. Akula license was revoked.
Right, exactly. They said
that he's still an honorable doctor. He's still
to this day still has his Medicare, his hospice facility.
Yes, and have his
now how he's paying for all this overhead is, I'm glad it's because. Oh Lord, I wouldn't even want to think about what this.
But I just want to appreciate Sound Off Louisiana, because if it had not be for you being here, Robert, you don't see any other media out
There's
here
no other. In
covering
fact,
a story like this.
In fact, the judge said, "Now if you see any media reports," he said, "I don't think you're going to." And I'm sure he, in my mind, he probably I don't qualify for media, but he said, if you do see something, turn it off. Do not discuss this with a family member. But he made it clear that there ain't gonna be any media coverage of this.
I just want to say that we need you, and this gives us the opportunity, the people, to really hear the true stories and the real truth about what's happening here in the courtroom.
Well, and I've just tried to.
So much.
You're quite welcome. Look,
Thank
if
you
things
so much,
change
Robert.
tomorrow, and the prosecution comes in and they hit something out of the park, you have my word. I'm going to report that. I reported to you what all transpired today. Based on what transpired today, I think he's going to be acquitted on all charges. But a jury can do most anything. I was pleased with the composition of the jury. To me, it's a good cross section of New Orleans.
Yes.
When they get back there.
I think they have a few different parishes involved.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a good cross section representation. You have black females, you have black males, you have white females, white males. So
absolutely.
it's
Young and old, so
it's
that's
about
good.
exactly. It's about evenly distributed. We will give you more reports. I'm heading back to Baton Rouge. It's going to be a long week because it's quite a trip up here. But I've been looking forward to this simply because it brings back such memories of what I did during a good part of my working career. So thank you for alerting me.
How many years?
I was with the FDIC for about 6 years, and I might would have wanted to stay, but I'm going to be honest, I lived out of a suitcase. I did. If they said, look, we got problems in an SNL in Gulfport, Mississippi,
it was time to show up.
all if you went to Gulfport, Mississippi. I also had to go to 4 different schools in Arlington, Virginia, and the shortest school is 2 weeks, the longest school was 4 weeks, and this old boy, he likes his South Louisiana food, and I'm gonna tell you, that stuff in Arlington, Virginia, it tastes like cardboard. There's no taste to it.
Okay, well, we understand, Robert.
So
we got that point.
I was fortunate enough, because a lot of people don't know this, there was a gentleman, he'll see this video, his name's Jerry Sumrall with the FDIC, and we talked for several months about forming our own loan review consulting firm. I was fortunate enough that he went for it. I did a lot of the computer work for us to do it. I told him that, because every banker knew him, I said, I feel like I'm getting a McDonald's franchise and I don't have to pay the franchise fee. and I did that for a number of years. Then I was a real estate auctioneer, and then I called it a day and started blogging. So, so for those who may have wondered, there's your 1-minute summary of what all Robert Burns has done. And I'm sure there are a lot of auctioneers out there that would say, we wish he'd have never been involved with the auctioneer. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that say we wish he'd never become a blogger, but too bad.
Well, I'm glad you're a blogger. We are so
I feel
proud
like the
of
Lord
you,
led
Robert.
me in that direction, because when I left the auction field, I said, Lord, I thought this was my calling, and He said it was for a while, but I'm giving you a different calling.
There you
and
go.
So, thank everyone.
Sound off Louisiana.
All righty, folks. I know we may have gone a little bit long. I hope you found it worth it. But we will give you installment 2 in covering this trial in the very near future. And we can't wait for Miss Kelly Anderson to take that witness stand. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next time.